remember being out there on the landing craft and watching the old ramp drop down in front of us, and away we went and dropped into the water and came ashore. Thought I was a very mature adult. Like some of the people I've talked to afterwards said, I grew old in 15 minutes. And I'm grateful that I've had such a wonderful partner in life as Jeanne that has helped me over some rough spots. She's been my psychiatrist and friend, lover.
I really believe I have unconditional love for Frank because none of us are perfect. Unconditional love means even though it's a really bad time and you really have been hurt deeply, that you still love that person.
Fly fishing's always been a therapy for me. You gotta appreciate what you're doing too, as well as what you're searching for. I love this area up here. You know, from the first time I came up here, it just became part of my soul. A lot of people will say that love belongs to the young. That's not love. You don't find love until you get up where we are right now. And it's really something.
After 70 years, I am so grateful that we have had these many years together.
Wow. I'm just trying to see how many friends are out there. You know, I wonder what the heck I'm doing up here. I'd feel a lot more comfortable if I was wading waist deep in the North Umpqua River with a fly rod in my hand. But you know, also I should mention this, that the most speaking I do is when I try to explain to Jeanne that I'm the boss of the house. So I'm not used to this. And also that when I try to make our neighbor's dog stay so I can give her the doggy bone. I guess I'm here because, in my judgment, I've had, over 91 years, what has become a darn near perfect life. And by perfect, I don't mean one without tragedy or trauma, because we have had that in our life as we've traveled down all these years. But what's amazing, what is really amazing, is that out of some of the most tragic events in our life have come some of the finest things in our life. Now, that doesn't make sense, but it sure has happened. And as I take you down the path of my life, you'll understand some of the things that I'm talking about. Okay, now I'll get back to who I am, and I hope I don't bore you. I was born in the little town of Carlton, about 40 miles southwest of here, on January 30th, 1923. And I was the son of Frank and Elsie Moore, and I was the fourth child out of 5 children in the family, and the first boy. And my sister always told me, "Buddy, you are badly spoiled." Maybe I was. But my reply to that was, sis, no, I'm not spoiled, but I've sure been given a lot of love. And because of that gift of receiving love, my entire life, I have not been afraid of giving love to other people. And it has been a rewarding thing to have that gift bring so many wonderful, wonderful friends into my life. And some of you are here today, by the way. Okay, and everything went well in our family until, well, I should back up a little bit here. And my nose is starting to run. I'm a little bit emotional. May I blow my nose? My father was a fairly successful businessman in Carlton, and he also was an avid fly fisherman. And so the first few years of my life were really ideal for a young man. Every summer we'd take off for a month or so and travel all over the Northwest, trying to find the finest place to catch the wily trout. Now that all ended when I was 9 years old, when my father died, and at the same time, the family business burned to the ground, leaving my mother basically destitute with 3 children still at home. And you know what was interesting? I idolized my father, and there was a long, long period of time when I refused in my brain to say that he was dead. He was coming back tonight or tomorrow, but it was never to be. A few years after that, my mother married a man from Canby, and we moved over to that beautiful little city. And on November the 5th, 1941, I had my first date with a beautiful young lady by the name of Jeanne Marie Mays. And at that night, I did not realize that she was the most precious gift I had ever received. But eventually we got married, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Just a month later, we just returned from church services on a Sunday morning and listening to the radio, and all of a sudden the announcer says, the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor. Well, I was already flying at the time, and I knew what I wanted to do immediately. So on the very next morning, on Monday, I was down at the Portland Air Base to enlist in the old Army Air Corps as a flying cadet. Well, about 4:30 in the afternoon, the flight surgeon come out and says, Moore, do you realize you're 90% colorblind? I've got to reject you. And it wasn't funny. It was, it was not funny, I'll tell you. I was not only rejected by the Army Air Corps, but I was totally dejected. But you know something? Because of that, well, I should say also that the next day I went down and tried to get in the Navy, and they gave me the same old baloney. But a year later, my friends and neighbors requested that I join the Army. And, but before I left, on January the 1st, 1943, I had the privilege of marrying Jeanne Marie Mays. And I left immediately afterwards. But now, remember earlier I said about tragedy and good things coming out of it? If my father hadn't died, I would not have moved to Canby, where I met Jeanne. If I had not been rejected for the Air Force, I would not have been able to remain home another year, and who knows, one of us might have found somebody else, and it wouldn't have been anyone near as nice, I'll tell you. But anyway, headed back for Fort Knox, Kentucky at the Armored Force School, and eventually winding up shipping out of New York for Europe, landing in England, and then being stationed in southern England for a short time, and then all of a sudden I had a cruise ship take me across the channel, but it had a landing ramp on front of it. So the old ramp dropped down, of course, and I didn't quite have to swim, but it was fun. Yeah, sure. Anyway, I participated in most of the major battles in Europe, the Battle of Normandy and Brittany and up through northern France. Darn that nose of mine. And into the little country of Luxembourg. And then we were there for a long time. The 83rd Division, whom I was attached to at that time, was totally decimated, probably way down below half strength. So we were there for a couple months and until December the 5th, and when we transferred up to the Hurtgen Forest, and that was one of the meat grinders of the whole war. And we just got up there, and most of the action ceased. And we wondered what the heck was happening, but we found out 11 days later when the Germans hit exactly where we had been in Luxembourg. And if we hadn't have moved when we did, I probably wouldn't be here today. But anyway, I continued. We went up and hit the northern end of the bulge right alongside the 82nd Airborne Division, pounded the Germans back, and then headed out over the Rhine and crossed over northern Germany by Magdeburg, over the Elbe, and some of our units got within just a very few miles of Berlin. We were pulled back and went down. We started heading south toward Munich. And the next day after the liberation of Dachau, we got to go into that camp and see why we were fighting. You hear the term, man's inhumanity to man. You'd have to see it to believe it. When we got there, there were stacks of body, 8 feet high. Some of the rooms were 30 feet long, and they were stacked full of bodies. And the skin, all they were was skin pulled over bones. It was just, you'd have to see it to really understand what I'm trying to say. Even the walking looked like walking dead. How in the world can people in a civilized country, civilized world, even think about doing something like that? But they did. Anyway, then for some unknown reason, I'm still trying to figure this out too. See, here I was in a lowly line company, front line company, and all of a sudden I was yanked out of that by orders for some reason to report to 3rd Army headquarters forward, right where General Patton's command post was. And I got to watch that wonderful man in peacetime activity. And I wish I had more time to tell you some of the stories, but if you come up and have a cup of coffee with us sometime, just instant coffee, by the way, I'll tell you some stories. But toward the end of the summer, that summer in 1945, I had enough points that I headed home, but it took a long time to get there. And finally I arrived back in the States, Camp Miles Standish, Boston, and I called Jeanne the minute I got off the boat and where I could reach a telephone. And I told her I'd be home in about a week. Well, somehow again, I don't know how this happened. I can't remember. But the next day, next morning early, I was down to Newark, New Jersey, crawling aboard an Air Force C-47, flying to Fort Lewis, McCord Field, where I arrived that night. Next morning, I had a pass. Jeanne still thought I was on the East Coast when I walked up on the porch. And I'll tell you, she tore the screen doors off. when she saw me coming. And she never was very athletic. She was always the last chosen on the team. But she leaped a good 4 feet in the air, right there. Darn that nose. Anyway, whoops, come on, get back on there. Anyway, that was the start of a really remarkable life together. And I thought about coming home, when I was coming home, I should say, I thought about going back to Oregon State and getting my teaching credentials and being a teacher and a coach. But then I thought, gosh, I've had enough regimentation. I want to be my own boss. So we bought a little business in Roseburg, right adjacent to the beautiful North Umpqua River. And I started fishing the river, became very adept at it. And I spent more time fishing than I did working. But anyway, just a year later, in 1947, I believe it was, our oldest son was born, and hooray, there was my fishing partner. But I should have mentioned, too, when we were going to cross northern Germany, we met, quote, soldiers. Some of them were 11, 12 years old. And they were so indoctrinated that they would not give up. So just a year after Frankie was born, I fell all apart. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And then I realized that here is this beautiful son, and those young soldiers were somebody's son. It's still there. Well, just a year after that, our beautiful first daughter, Linda, was born. And we started down, really, it was a wonderful, wonderful life. Again, I still spent more time fishing than I did working. But Jeanne, she never said she minded. Maybe she did. But all went smooth with just the 4 of us in the family until 1952. Our other little son came along. We couldn't call him little. He was pretty good size, and he was a true nut. He's sitting out in the audience right over here somewhere right now. And he would be on a picnic table somewhere and run full speed and dive off head first. But you know, I'm not quite through with all our kids yet, but every one of our children puts other people and their fellow man first. And I love it. I really do. That's wonderful kids. Anyway, in winter of 56, the spring of 57, I had the chance to purchase Clarence Gordon's Forest Service lease at Steamboat, and built what is now known as SteamboatInn. And when I was goofing off from work and helping Clarence, doing some guiding for them, I met all of his clients, of course, and all we had to do was call some of those clients, and they would come up in a minute and stay with us. So we had built-in clientele, and that really helped. We didn't have to advertise at all. Yeah, there's the place right there. That's when we first moved in. Anyway, it all went along well until 62, when our next daughter, Colleen, was born. And she is a little angel. She's not so small anymore, but she's still an angel. And again, we kept progressing down the road until 1970, when on Thanksgiving Eve, 1970, our beautiful Linda was coming home from school, college, and was killed in a traffic wreck. A kid on drugs ran straight into him. And I'll never forget the night of the memorial service. Jeanne was holding me tight, or I should say we were holding each other tight. And Jeanne says, "Honey, losing Linda was terrible. It was the worst thing that ever happened to us. But I don't know what I'd do if I'd ever lost you." Wow. And you know, that changed my thinking a lot in life. I realized that no matter what happened, as long as you had the love, you had so much more than you didn't have, might not have everything. You might not have what you lost, but you still had practically everything. So, after we sold the inn in '75 and continued down the life's pathway, and I realized now that the closer I get to the end of my life, that I have had a darn near perfect life. And I have realized, too, that no matter how old you get, you never want to stop dreaming. Dreaming what you can be or can do. And right now, Jeanne and I are having the dream of just a couple, 4 more years, whatever it may be, of celebrating our 75th wedding anniversary. And that's the focus I'm on right now. We are on. So each one of you out there, never forget, there is no impossible dream. I used to sing that when I was doing a lot of voice work, the impossible dream. But there is no impossible dream if you work hard at it. And another thing you must work hard at is the art of living. And living is an art. And it's not easy sometimes. But no matter how tired you may get, and when you get as old as I am, you really got to push yourself. And Jeanne gives me hell all the time. She says, "Back off a little bit. Quit cutting wood." I'm not going to quit as long as I can stand. And then also, the one thing that I don't want any of you to ever forget, don't be afraid of receiving love. Because of that, you can learn to, I could tell you a story just the other day. May I have one story, Coach? The other day, I was talking to a very, very dear friend of mine, and first time I ever seen him breaking his emotions. And I've known him for a long time. And it was because of love that I gave him. But anyway, please, as you focus on your travel down life's pathway, don't be afraid to receive love, and please don't be afraid to give love. And you know, I've been blessed with so many honors all my life, both civilian and military. But there's no honor as great as that I received on January the 1st, just 2 little words, 1943. I do. From my wife. I love you. Get up here. And life is good.
Okay?